Welcome to Liturgical Shenanigans, a Wayfolk Arts podcast, with your hosts, Hannah,
Phil,
Jackson,
and Maddie. All right.
We're back,
Hey,
everybody.
Welcome to Liturgical Shenanigans.
Welcome to Liturgical Shenanigans, everyone.
And happy Pride.
Yes,
it's June.
it's June.
It's June.
June is full of so many fun times. It's
true.
the time of the gays. It's the time of Juneteenth.
It's the time of the straights, right? Like getting married in June, June brides.
There's
Well,
a lot of
that is-
June weddings.
7 brides for 7 brothers. That's a whole thing.
Sure. Yep. You finally passed school for the most part.
Oh, dear.
Uh-huh.
And those of you listening who aren't yet, I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hang in there.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's June. We already said that. Yo, starting the podcast is the most uncomfortable.
That's real.
Maddie, I wonder as we go into Pride if there's something you would want to share with us to invite us into. Why are you looking at me like that? We planned this.
Yeah, but it's not just about pride.
It's not just about pride. All right. So anyways, we were talking about the fact that it is Pride Month and what we wanted to talk about that kind of had to do with it. And for a lot of the LGBTQIA community, especially ones that have in some capacity engaged in church world or religious world of some kind, have had to go through the process of something called deconstructing. Do we want to define that
I think
right off
so.
the bat?
Yeah, it's been a buzzword in church circles and in post-church circles. Essentially, probably a good shared definition is taking apart the structures of your belief systems that you took for granted or that have been maybe given to you that you grew up with, in order to sort through what does match with your value system and beliefs and what no longer is helpful.
And when I say oftentimes people in the LGBTQ community have had to do that, it's because usually when we deconstruct, it's deconstructing harmful narratives. So sub-minority groups are often the ones that are experiencing the harm of church culture, religious culture, sometimes even spiritual culture, just because a lot of those belief systems like to say certain ways of being are wrong or sinful or bad. So we were talking a little bit about that as a topic tonight. And to get us started, I am going to read some centering breaths I wrote back, I think in like Thanksgiving-y season, at the beginning of the holiday season for this year. And I specifically wrote them for holiday gatherings while deconstructing. So they're meant to be ways to center yourself when you're sitting in a room of people that maybe still have those harmful beliefs, but you're just working your way through them. So I hope that this kind of invites us into this conversation in an as grounded as possible way. However you're listening, I'd invite you to hear these breaths and maybe breathe them with us if you're safely able to do so. So maybe that means pausing and waiting until you can come back to the podcast. You are also free to just receive them. But whatever grounding yourself in your space right now means to you. Breathe in, invitation. Breathe out, rejection. Breathe in, seen. Breathe out, masked. Breathe in, held. Breathe out, neglected. Breathe in, found. Breathe out, lost.
That feels like such a beautiful way to frame the topic of deconstructing. Because while you're going through deconstructing, it's so scary and painful.
Yeah.
But the reason you deconstruct is because the things you have either aren't working anymore or you've learned something new and you have to question what you knew previously, or my brain ran away with the other one. But the sort of the hoped for other side of deconstructing is all of those second words that, no, first words, sorry.
That you're breathing in.
That you're breathing in renewed goodness, renewed beliefs that do match up with lived experience and values, and you don't have to experience the harm of previously held beliefs anymore.
Well, and it's so interesting because I think deconstructing, yes, it's a buzzword. It's often kind of seen as a dirty word.
Yeah.
Again, particularly in the circles that someone might be deconstructing from. But I would argue it's actually a really healthy practice for us to be engaging in everything in our life, to be relearning and reevaluating and rediscovering the world, ourselves. And it's an acknowledgement that we don't always know everything.
Right.
And that is health. And good.
The model that almost all of Scripture follows.
Yeah.
Right? That something is being named as like, hey, you're living in this way and saying you are my people, but you've entangled, devotion to me with these things that are not of love or are not of God, and an invitation into what would it look like to release the pieces that are harmful. I think we could open up the Bible almost anywhere. And if we're talking about the prophets, if we're talking about the law, if we're talking about Jesus, every letter Paul writes is saying like, hey, you've let some harmful stuff in. And so when you were giving your things of deconstruction where it's helpful, Hannah, I was thinking of, if we started to construct something out of cement or brick and we realized, oh, wait, this mortar dissolves, right? Like we would take that down.
Yeah.
And we would rebuild. And that's something harmful has gotten in the system.
It is so hard, though, to do, particularly if you've been in a spiritually abusive situation that has taught you to distrust your gut, that questioning anything is wrong. Yeah. Untangling that and deconstructing from that in and of itself is so hard and can take years. To even begin the process of like, oh, okay, so what is and is not something that actually settles good and comfortably within me and my core value system, because you have to be willing to even identify what feels bad. And you may have been taught that what feels bad is actually good. Right. And it's just messy. And if you're not in an environment where people are creating spaces for you to ask questions, like if you're not really talking outside of your family that all believes the same thing, say you've been homeschooled and you've literally never been allowed to socialize with anyone outside of your environment, that makes it even harder. So I think sometimes those of us who are in circles that use the buzzword really frequently, we take for granted the fact that, yes, it was probably hard for a lot of us, but there's a whole network of people who may not even get to hear what the word is. It's just messy. So it's really important to meet people where they're at when they're doing it and try super hard not to shame people, particularly when they are still maybe saying harmful beliefs, because shaming them is not going to encourage a dialogue that involves questioning.
Yeah.
Or growth.
Yeah.
So why do we think folks see it, one as a negative, or two as a threat? Because I think that's how I've often heard it spoken about in a negative sense, is the this is trendy, this is like very tied to like the buffet style faith, right? Like the way you were just saying it, right? Like what settles right with me, what doesn't feel right, that kind of thing can be caricaturized. Is that the right word? Characterized as like, oh, these, God not letting me do these things makes me uncomfy, and I want to be able to do these things. I want to be able to have sex before marriage, and I want to be able to smoke and drink and get tattoos. So I'm going to deconstruct and say, my God doesn't care if I do that. I think that's how I've heard it. I'm curious how y'all have heard it pitched as a threat.
Yeah.
I think it's a threat to authority. Anytime anytime anyone starts asking questions, I was thinking while you were talking, Maddie, just the act of asking questions can be a frightening experience to someone because it could mean in a narrative that you're not trusting. And so authority figures are rightly sometimes afraid, rightly in a power sense, because people who ask questions do start to work away at authority.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Especially blindly held authority. So it's a good thing. You should be chipping away at authority, but also there is that threat to like, well, if enough questions are asked, maybe A, authority doesn't have the answers and hasn't asked their own questions enough to be able to cope with questions.
Yeah.
But B, what has been ignored could like eventually begin to come to light.
Yeah.
Similar lines of that, Jackson, I was going to say it's fear.
Yeah.
Fear of, what if I don't have all the answers to your questions? What does this mean for the future of this thing I've built? What if by you asking, I start asking questions and then everything just falls apart? What are we supposed to do then?
Or more terrifyingly, I think, to a leader who is afraid. What if you ask questions, which makes your friend ask questions, which makes everyone ask questions, and everyone's asking questions?
The whole kingdom crumbles.
Right.
And people do not like troublemakers. We were literally just talking about this before hitting record. Troublemakers ask questions. They point out the flaws or the things that have holes and maybe just a bandage was put over them and there's actually water seeping out. How is no one looking at that? We don't like to name the elephant in the room. And when people start doing that, that's when the turning against happens. And that's also what is so painful for the question askers. This community that for so long has been, these are my people. I love them. I believed that I was loved by them and they told me they knew what was best for me. And now because I'm having questions, oh, you don't love me anymore and I may not be welcome here anymore and that feels bad, so why would I do this?
It's interesting because we're in the middle of kind of working on an Elijah project, and the prophetic mood or the prophetic mode is very much in the vein of the person who notices the things and asks the questions, who longs for the community to be better, to be in alignment, but is consistently repulsed as a result of that. So it is a really painful journey along the prophetic journey, but also, like as you said earlier, Phil, all the Psalms and stuff like that. Walter Brueggemann has like the process, which is very similar to deconstruction, that the Psalms often go through, is the orientation, disorientation, and then reorientation. So in orientation, you're noticing the mortar that's crumbling. Disorientation, you're taking it all apart and the wall isn't even there anymore, or the building isn't even there anymore, and you're trying to figure out what goes where and how it goes together. And then the reorientation is that move back towards something else, the more, or maybe not the answers, but the resonance with some of those needs that you read in your piece at the beginning, Maddie. So,
and this is how all learning and growth happens. Right. All learning and growth is, are we willing to step out and test our belief system, our understanding of the world? And as we learn pieces of it that work, walk on that more. And as we learn pieces of it that don't, rethink it.
And it's just easier to be the person that has all the answers and does it right. Always.
Especially if no one's asking questions.
Well, it doesn't, that part actually doesn't require any faith.
No.
Right? Or any trust, because we talk about like faith being like sitting, like I can believe a chair will hold me. Faith is sitting in it. Right. But we could be like, well, why do you need to sit in it? We know. Like, why do you need to test God by sitting in the chair? Don't do it. But that's not really trust, right?
It's kind of like your rough draft of an essay looks so good until the professor tears it apart. Oh, it was so beautiful and clean when I turned it in.
Do better.
Hannah, I could see you holding thoughts in your hand.
Yeah, I lost one of them.
Oh,
no. No, it's okay. It's my brain's a little fuzzy tonight. My thought was kind of just a vamp on one of the fears that Maddie named, that the fear of the question asker. So there's the fear of the authority figure that we've named, but that fear of the person asking questions is what was for me one of the scary parts of deconstructing. It was, I really love these things. What if asking these questions means that I lose these things that I really love?
Yeah.
Not necessarily that they'll leave me, but like I'm not gonna believe these things anymore. I'm not gonna, like, what if asking the questions makes me lose the values that is making me ask the questions?
Yeah.
And that's scary.
Yeah.
And it's really hard when you both feel compelled to ask questions while also holding that fear of what might be on the other side. And when Jackson and Maddie, when you guys were talking about that authority, the sort of authority that wants to hold the control and the power, my brain immediately had this vision of what a different sort of authority could look like. One that is open to questions because it knows that questions have the ability to make us better, and to be the sort of person who is willing to not have all the answers, but as that person in authority, that people need someone to walk with them in the questions because that walk is scary. So even if you don't have the answer, you can be there with that person. Or maybe you can go, oh, yes, I've been on this walk. Here, let me show you the things that I learned. And maybe we can walk that way together. Maybe you'll go down a different road than I did, but I'm here with you. And that isn't so often not the experience that people have when they're deconstructing. They do it alone rather than in that sort of community that I think helps us do the reorientation, the reconstruction so much better.
Yeah, I wanted to jump on just a short thing. The beliefs that you're going to lose that are beautiful, and the reality of community, right? Like
Right.
That if I push hard on this, I might lose literally my family, the only community that I really know, and a lot of times, I'm very it's Tarkin. Like the more you tighten your grip, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. I think it's the whole, I think when people are raised in a system that really pushes for, this is what our faith looks like, and any deviation from this is evil.
Yeah.
It's also very Rapunzel's mom, right? Like men with pointy teeth. You know what I mean, right? Like, but then you go out in the world, and then I meet a man who doesn't have pointy teeth.
He's cute.
And he's sweet, and he's also a jerk. Bad example.
Sure.
But there are non-pointy teeth men out there, like everybody at the Ugly Duckling or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Too far. So
you haven't seen the movie Tangled.
I got tangled in it.
Go watch Tangled.
But that whole idea of are we, or those of us that have that fear that causes us to try to control the belief system or police it or protect. I think that's from a drive to protect people we love.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
From beliefs
is a
that we
burden.
have. Well, like if I believe that, following these other ways or other beliefs are going to lead to your eternal damnation, then I'm going to work to protect you from that. But in doing so, and now I see when I walk in the world and it's not black and white, I'm going to lose that trust in everything. It's like pastors I had that were like, well, that's why understanding the 7-day creation or 6-day creation is so important, is because if we let one thing go, everything will go.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's a real fear of that.
It's similar, or maybe exactly the same, to when we start wanting to more ethically purchase things or spend our money places. So
Sucks.
as a
And
personal,
it's good, but it sucks.
as a personal example, so I don't usually eat at Chick-fil-A personally, and you can research all you want about why maybe the person really excited to talk about pride doesn't eat at Chick-fil-A.
It's because they put pickles on everything.
that's why.
It's
For sure.
criminal.
But anyway, so I don't personally eat there. And I mentioned this to someone, and another fun fact about me is I do love Taco Bell. And the person said to me, "Oh my gosh, wait until you find out all the like awful things Taco Bell does. You won't eat there either." And I looked at them and said, "Yeah, exactly. It's why I don't want to know. I hate knowing where my money is going, because it does, for me, change how I spend it. That knowledge sucks. It's painful. I don't like knowing that big corporations do what I think are bad, awful things, because I want to keep spending my money there. It does suck for everyone. It's not just the person in charge that's losing something. We are all losing something, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it is painful. There's grief in that. Something has died, and even if it means perhaps things might be better, more comfortable, safer, whatever, for the person that's going through deconstructing, that journey sucks. And there will always be perhaps some kind of painful feeling of loss at the end, if there ever really is an end of that journey.
So what do we think creating spaces, opportunities for folks to engage in worship, in a safe place for questions and unknown, whether it's, the Sunday morning worship in particular, or some other specific event?
Something I really love about, if you're familiar with like the children in worship model, at a young age, it invites kids to do questioning, because the children in worship model, it's you tell a biblical story using sometimes sand, usually like specifically wooden figurines. It's just a very simple way of storytelling, but there's a whole I wonder section, and it is meant to just be everyone, the person leading the story, the children, the other adults in the room, to ask I wonder questions and sit in the not always answering it. I wonder how this character felt when this happened. I wonder what it was like to walk in the desert. That normalizing question asking without answering it, uncomfortable, and so important for normalizing a space that does that and allowing wonder. So I think that's one really great way that the church does sometimes do it, if they use that model, and could continue to do it even without an official children of worship curriculum. You can do that in small group settings and Bible study. I'm a really big fan of the less like up there lecturing, the better. When I did youth group, I was much more interested in, I'm going to give you the background knowledge because I have the background knowledge and I'm excited to share it with you, but I'm going to create as much space as possible for you to tell me what you're experiencing in it and for you to ask me whatever questions you want so that I can say I don't know.
And that's a great model, I think, of ministry leadership is to be comfortable in the I don't knows. No. To be willing to be uncomfortable in the I don't knows. Kind of like what you were saying, Jackson. I think if our anxiety is leading and we're trying to make sure we preserve something like our attendance numbers or our giving or our even the respect people have for me and my knowledge, that's not trust. That's something different.
And I think too, like as far as like making worship spaces that are spaces for people who are deconstructing, I think this is a little bit of a Wayfolk-ish plug, but written prayers are a way to do that. And I think there's no way that you can make every service hit everyone in their moment of deconstruction all the time. There's just too many varied facets to deconstruction. However, as worship leaders, as practitioners of worship, and people who spend time thinking about how to prepare worship well for people, picture people when you are preparing worship. In the same way that you would picture people as you're preparing a sermon, picture someone new each week. Imagine what it would feel like to belong, and craft intentional language for that person. And that's born out of consistent relationship, that's born out of conversation, that's born out of mutual trust and things like that. But I feel like that's such an important part of worship, because it doesn't take much in worship. It doesn't have to take much in worship to feel like you belong in it. If there's a moment where it happens, because that one moment where it happens, where a liturgical prayer is read, a prayer of assurance is read, and that one line says, "Oh, that's right where I'm at right now." That's going to be a big feeling in that service. It's going to, overweigh the one hymn with the weird lyric in it. So that intentional work of crafting intentional prayers, intentional moments of spoken words to be a gift of belonging to someone specifically, I think leans into that crafting of a space for people who are deconstructing.
And as much as possible, having the intention be to foster belonging or to see rather than to suck back in. Or get them back. We need to reconvince them to join us. No, you are here and we see you exactly as you are. And not that you need our permission to be, but it is okay. We love you in it and want to sit with you in it. Without it being, I need to buy you back, or we need you in these pews because the numbers are dwindling.
Right. Or those even things, provide answers all the time. Yeah.
Those things will bubble up, or to save them. Basically, maybe try to, as much as possible, eliminate your savior complex. And those things will bubble up. We're humans. I have a huge savior complex. But trying to acknowledge when it bubbles up and put it to the side and shift our intentionality as much as we're able to do. Yeah.
I can feel the clock on us. And there's way more to say. I know we're going to do our after show too, but there's one thing I wanted to say in this one.
Sims.
You got one more?
Yeah.
Do you got yours? Because I won't forget mine.
I won't either.
All right, cool. But just I think I get to do this a lot in a lot of spaces, which it's actually probably my favorite thing to get to do is to provide or make a safe space for people to do this work. Because ultimately deconstruction is a helpful term, I think, because we're looking to see what to take apart. But really what it's about, I think, is identifying what our foundations are, pulling out what actually ultimately does matter, and the difference between a faith that's built on love or a faith that's built on some sort of anxiety or, black and white thinking, obedience, kind of cultic, fear. It's such a different thing. And so gradually pulling that out and letting there be a new structure built on what this person wants their life to be about is so fun. Whether it's in groups like our pub theology or individually in therapy or in my own stuff, just even trying to figure out what is it I'm all about? And what does that mean as a Christian, right? Like as that being rebuilt. So just the idea of if you're going to get started on this work, or if you're even thinking, how do I start? I think that's a great question to start with, is like, even before I pull apart anything else, what is my foundation? What's the bottom layer of my faith? What does it mean? And maybe it's Jesus. Cool. What's that mean? Right? What's Jesus all about then? Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I'm done.
Okay. I'll tag in. My final thought was, so we've talked a lot about like why deconstruction can be scary or painful, and how to create an inviting space for it to happen. I also wanted to say, though, that like deconstruction work is worth it. There is something on the other side of the deconstructing, even though it is often a painful process. You're deconstructing so that you can build again, so that you can live with integrity to whatever those foundational pieces that Phil was talking about. Once you identify those pieces and go, okay, what do we actually want to build with if this is our foundation? Let's now that we've taken apart what we see doesn't fit with that, what do we want to build with that? And you might be able to build something so much stronger, so much more beautiful, so much more in line with that foundation. And you can't do that if you don't ask the questions. And And if you don't ask the questions, I feel like it's so much easier for those things to just get knocked over or crumble without you noticing it.
Like to literally disintegrate, right?
Right.
To have these
Yeah.
different pieces of you.
So the work is worth it.
Yeah.
Don't give up in the midst of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to end also. Sorry. But I mentioned this earlier, but I just think it's important to say just a call for all of us to be gentle with ourselves in this journey and also gentle with others. It's really easy, particularly if we feel like, well, I've done the work of deconstructing and now I'm on the other side, and yeah, you become what you tried to deconstruct. But you feel like it's so beautiful, and maybe it's because you're just so excited to bring people over to you. And just remember that we are all clinging to what we have probably worked very, very hard to believe it to be true. And calling people out, though yes, oftentimes really important and brave, is painful for everyone. And we don't change and learn in shame, at least not in any helpful or sustainable way. We change and learn in community, and when we feel like we belong and are seen and are loved. And so if we want to foster those spaces, we have to all be better about saying kindly to someone, hey, can I invite you to ask a question about what you just said? Or can I let you know what comes up in me? Versus, you're wrong, that was bad, knock it off. Goes both ways. So.
Friends, I will end it. Thank you all for being conversation partners on this topic of deconstruction today. We are going to continue the conversation in our after show. So if you are a patron of the show, you can find it over there. If you are wanting to become a patron of the show,
You can do so.
you can do so.
For our lowest tier, you get access at what? Oh my god.
Here you go.
For the lowest tier of money, oh my gosh, you can access our after show, which is always an extension of our conversation because clearly we don't know when to stop talking.
I'm hoping we can hear some big landmarks on some of our own stories of.
Yeah.
how
We get
came to
real
this.
personal over
Yeah, let's
there.
do it.
Sure, yeah. So if you're looking for a way to check that out, you can head on over to patreon.com/Wayfolk Arts. You'll find a number of different tiers over there of patronship and things like that for you to explore. You can find us on the Instagrams. You can find us on the Discords.
On the Facebooks.
You can find us on the Facebooks. And you can find us on all the pod hosting sites out there as well, as far as when this actual episode goes live each month.
And we always link all of these things in the episode description, so please feel free to check that out. And to really call out our Patreon right now, we know we've mentioned on the previous episode that we're in a season of working on scripture enactments. There is going to be maybe some fun patron art and fun patron invitation to join us in some of our thoughts and our translations coming up. So now's a really great time to join if you haven't already.
Yeah, so definitely check that out.
I know Jackson wants the last word,
Okay.
but legit, Maddie, those breasts that you offered at the start, I would love for us to go out that way.
Okay, I love
Thinking
that.
about what our foundations are.
I would glad.
That's really making it my last word. So
I
I
would
put the
be-
foundation back in there.
I would be glad to resettle us in ending. And hey, if you're listening and it's June, happy Pride. And if you're deconstructing, we see you and we love you and you belong here. I don't know how to re-invite the breaths. So re-center yourself in whatever that means for you in your own space as we breathe in and out together. Breathe in, invitation. Breathe out, rejection. Breathe in, seen. Breathe out, masked. Breathe in, held. Breathe out, neglected. Breathe in, found. Breathe out, lost.